I am now very excited to welcome someone I truly love, and that is Sam Acho, the founder and president of Athletes for Justice. He's a humanitarian, he's an author, he's a 9-year NFL veteran, and I adore him. Thank you for being here, Sam.
Thank you so much, Danny.
It's hot.
How are you doing?
I'm all right. I got there. I got it together.
I know we usually ask me the questions.
Yeah, ask me a question.
If I could just start. If those tears had words, what would they say?
I am deeply full of both sorrow and a tremendous weariness. But I know that we need to use that sort of emotion to fight the good fight. And the last year when I was here, I just lost my mother. And I know that my mother would be so angry about the things that are happening in the world right now, and she would want me to use my platform to help have these discussions and make these things better. In a small way. I can't solve them, but I can help make them better. So that's what those tears say.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Round of applause for,
Thank you. So the last time you joined me on stage, we were in Chicago, and you talked about the incredible work that you did transforming a liquor store into a food mart. And I'm wondering if you can remind us all about that.
Well, it's actually a perfect fit, talking about some of that righteous anger or that righteous indignation. So Danny mentioned I played about a decade in the NFL. So I was playing from about 2011 to 2020. And my last year, my penultimate year was in Chicago playing with the Bears. And I was excited to be in Chicago because my previous team was the Arizona Cardinals, Phoenix, Arizona, beautiful city, beautiful weather. But I wanted to go to a place where there were some real issues. And so I ended up signing with Chicago, and there were some real issues in Chicago. But I didn't realize where that would take me. By the grace of God, my mom is still around. I saw her this morning.
Yay.
My dad's still around, saw them this morning. They made a huge impact around the world. Parents are both born and raised in Nigeria. They do medical mission work overseas, and they help with hospitals and doctors and all these kinds of things. And so me being an NFL player, okay, what am I supposed to do? Well, it was right around 2019, 2020, COVID.
Yeah.
And then also the height of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, all of this social injustice. And so me and a bunch of the athletes were angry. We were frustrated. There was a little sentiment of fear.
Yeah.
But there was this deal of, okay, what do we do with our anger? And so it was, okay, do we tweet at the president? Do we post a tweet with our social media?
Right.
Do we protest? Right? Do we organize? And actually ended up making a call to a friend of mine who was a nonprofit leader in Chicago. And I said, hey, there's a lot of issues going on. What do you need us to do? We will do whatever you want. Protest, organize, social media. And she said, honestly, Sam, we need you just to show up. Just show up. And I'm like, what do you mean? She said, Sam, the kids in our community who have been neglected, who have been forgotten, they just need somebody to listen to them. And so I got a couple athletes together from, if you're a fan of sports, players from the Bears, the Bulls, the Cubs, the Blackhawks, the White Sox, and we just showed up. And we listened. And as we listened to some of the hearts of the people saying, man, how come people who look like me are the ones getting shot? How come my neighborhood's the one with the broken glass and the buildings that are getting burned down? We heard that, but we also saw something. We saw a food desert. 2 grocery stores, 17 liquor stores in a half-mile radius. And so that got us angry. We get a chance to live in some of the suburbs because we're playing up in, wherever the different cities we play, but that's a part of the community. And so, long story short, we listened to some of the young leaders and some of the older leaders, and they said, hey, would you be able to help us with this? We said, okay, what do you need? We asked them, where do you get your healthy food from? Actually, where do you get your food from? They said, Sam, well, we go to McDonald's or the gas station. I was like, the gas station? Yeah, the gas station. I said, okay, what if you want to get something healthy or organic? Where do you get food? They said, Sam, if you want to get something healthy or organic, these kids on the south side of Chicago, west side of Chicago, they said, we have to commute 45 minutes to the next city to even get something organic. So yes, we would love a food mart in our community. And so with our anger, the athletes, we decided to use our voice. And we got some guys together and sat with some of the young, we called them young entrepreneurs, and said, okay, what do you need? So they actually designed this dream, what they called it, a food mart. The neighborhood's called Austin, so they called it Austin Harvest, building community through food. So what the athletes did on the back end is raise some of the funds, right? We organized, raised some money, and then the nonprofit leaders procured a building, and these 14, 15, and 16-year-old, I'll call them young entrepreneurs, these are high school kids, middle school kids, who, height of COVID, summer jobs were canceled. So they were trying to get money. There was no food, right? Oftentimes they get their food from school. School was canceled, so they actually designed their facility. And so that's what we decided to do. And that was a pop-up mart. It took about, we invited our friends. So we invited Roger Goodell, who's the commissioner of the NFL. He showed up. The mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, she showed up. The superintendent of the Chicago Police Department, he showed up. And then athletes and some of the young professionals, young entrepreneurs, and it turned into this, now that's a fully operational food mart that these 15, 16, 17-year-old kids are running.
Yeah, round of applause. What's so impressive to me is that, from talking to you before, I know you learned so much from those kids and those elders, but you learned so much from the community. It was not y'all coming in and telling these folks what to do. And I talked to Karen Washington about that earlier. That's not what communities need. They just need support. They need you to show up.
Yeah, I would say they need a runway. I mean, the last thing that we wanted to do was to come and say, hey, look at me. I play in the NFL. I'm going to solve all your problems. I don't know the problem. So educate me. So literally every single week, we pulled up some chairs, sat in a circle, and just listened. Week after week after week. And whether it was one kid that showed up or 20, we would just show up and listen. And with listening, it built trust. Oftentimes people want to fly in and just hop in and say, look at me, I'm the superhero. It's like, that was not us. We let them guide us. And these 13, 14, 15-year-old young people, they led the way. So much so that from even the partnerships with some of the local grocers, they're the ones who are going and procuring the food. They said, hey, we'd love to sell flowers at our food mart. Can we do that? Right? We'd love to get rid of this liquor store because this liquor store is right next to our nonprofit center and it feels like it's like a little bit dark. Is there a way to do something about that? I mean, people have been praying in that community for 20 years, 2 decades, to get rid of that one facility. Even the police were saying, man, ever since we had a chance to tear down the liquor store, they said ever since this liquor store was torn down, the police said that, they said the activity has lessened, meaning like the gang activity has gone down. Think about this for a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, who that's their everyday life. And so the fact that we didn't just come in and said, hey, I got the solution, we sat, we listened, said, hey, tell me more about the pain, the frustration, the fear. And then they guided the way.
Teamwork and collaboration is like the heart of what you do. And I'm wondering, I need lessons. I need lessons on how to live in this moment that we are in about that teamwork and collaboration. What is your advice?
Yeah, my biggest advice when it comes to teamwork and collaboration is if you want to get anything done, whether in your current field of work, where maybe it's something you do on the side, like if you want to get anything done of significance, do it with others. You have to let your ego die and realize, okay, I cannot do this by myself. Like my ego would have said, okay, I want to be the superstar, right? These young people, they were on Steve Harvey's show. It was like, and I was like, man, somebody was like, I want to do that too, But it was like, it's not about you. It was about me dying to myself, dying to my ego, and saying, okay, what do I have? And what I did have is I had some relationships. I happened to know a couple guys who played baseball, and they happened to know that I cared about the community. I cared about the people in my city. Happened to know a couple basketball players. Happened to have the courage to call up a couple of my teammates. And all of a sudden, I had that first conversation I knew a nonprofit leader. And so that conversation, I remember I was in tears that night. Because some of these nonprofit leaders, I was on a Zoom call with them, and they were saying, man, our city's being, you turn on the news, it was like the city of Chicago was being burned down. And it didn't feel like home. So there was a bit of anger and frustration, but it wasn't just, okay, well, now that I'm here, I'm gonna solve it. It was like, no, what can we do? Yeah. So the athletes partner with the police, partner with the young people, with the nonprofit leaders, all of a sudden partner with, we mentioned some of the people at the NFL league office. Yeah. Just people who we happen to have, like, just ask. Yeah. Just so happened that Roger Goodell's wife is from Chicago. So the commissioner of the NFL, we're like, hey, man, like, your wife's from here. You say you care. Do you care? He said, I'll show up. Sam, I'll show up for you. And he showed up. Just so happened that the police, the superintendent, and there was a tension with the police in that community. Just so happened that the superintendent of the Chicago Police Department happened to know my dad, who was a former pastor in Dallas, Texas, and he happened to be he came from Dallas and he came to Chicago. He was like, yeah, I'll show up. And so it wasn't just me, or it wasn't just the nonprofit,
Right.
It was the entire community. I mean, so much so that I mentioned some of the athletes who first we helped build the pop-up mart. But after seeing the pop-up mart, the young people said, can we build something more permanent? Like right now, it's just like an after-school thing, 3 days a week. And oh, by the way, we are living in Chicago. It's going to get cold. What happens when it's cold? It's like an open-air tent. Is there a way to do something more permanent? It's going to take more than just a couple athletes. We actually got the community together, partnered with a local media, 670 The Score, and a guy who happened to be a guy named Danny Parkins. Happened to be he's on Fox TV now, or for Fox Sports. And he happened to say, man, Sam, I care about community. What if we did like a 24-hour radiothon fundraiser to get more than just the athletes involved? And so fast forward, in order to build that permanent food mart, it took 14 athletes first. All of a sudden, 5,000 people donated money. Right? Some of the athletes, they donated, these guys got $30,000 checks. Not everybody was there. So for the athletes, for the community, it was like, the average gift was like $47. We raised nearly $1 million. And that money went to this permanent food mart.
Bigger round of applause for that.
So that just goes to the power of it being more than just yourself.
Right.
It takes people.
These relationships are so important, and you can reach, going back to this idea of being uncomfortable, talking to people you don't always agree with is really, is really important. Yeah. And we have to do it even when we don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, even politically, I don't have the same views as some of the political leaders who were in Chicago. I don't have the same view. I was an NFL PA, like the union rep, so I was like fighting against the ownership. And I had the gall to call the commissioner, the guy who I was sitting across the table from. But it wasn't about me.
Yeah.
Like, everyone has something that they care about. And if we could be willing to, for lack of better terms, take off our shoes, take off our sandals, and just get comfortable, to be able to say, hey, let me know what you care about most. I knew at that time that the commissioner of the NFL really cared about the image of the league. And sports had been canceled. And so if he really cared about the image of the league, well, this is something that the players in your league are doing. Will you show up? And he did. Probably cared about his wife, too. Cared about his marriage, right? Your wife cares about this. Will you show up?
Yeah.
I'm just saying, whatever it takes to make the change you want to see.
The work that you do is full of challenges. And, those challenges for a lot of us, especially, again, right now, can become overwhelming. And I wonder what sort of methods you use to not be overwhelmed. Yeah,
that's such a great question. I think one of the things I do is just try to not see things from the world's perspective. I mean, if you get so caught up in, I want to just put a blanket on it, but social media, so caught up in what the person to your left or to your right is doing, it can be very distracting and discouraging. Right? I have 4 kids, right? My wife, I think, is somewhere in the back or somewhere around here, right? And my oldest son, he was crying yesterday because my daughter said something to him, and he said something back, and I got mad at him. He's like, Daddy, why do girls always win, right? Why does she always win? And he's crying, and Daddy, why do the girls always win? And part of me wanted to be like, dude, it's not about winning and losing. Who cares? You know what I mean? But there is this deep thing of man, we want to be successful. We want to be noticed. We want to be seen. We want to be loved. But we're searching for it in all the wrong places. We're searching for it when it comes to fame. Maybe if I'm the one who gets all the accolades, then I'll feel loved and accepted. We search for it sometimes with money. Man, if I get enough money, then I'll be seen and known. Maybe it's success. If I lead this nonprofit, it seems like a good thing, maybe then I'll be the man. Even now, so you talked about it. So I started a nonprofit called Athletes for Justice. I'm actually putting that on pause because I'm man, there's actually a better way to get to athletes. I just joined, or not just, about 3 years ago, joined what's called a family office, a multi-family office for athletes and founders who want to make an impact. The ego in me said, hey, I started this thing on my own. What happened to my own thing? But it's no, Sam, you want to make an impact? Go to the people who actually care and have the resources, the funds to do it. So the ego has to die, and the way you have to kind of let that ego die is realize it's not a competition. It's not a zero-sum game. Right? If I think, okay, well, Danny's getting all the credit, and it's no, Danny, tell me your story. Because those tears are coming from somewhere. Or I was sitting with the guy, anyone who, any NFL, Philadelphia Eagles fan. Jamie, what's up, brother? Zach, what's up, brother? Got about some of my homies in the crowd. A guy named A.J. Brown played for the Philadelphia Eagles. Did y'all hear the story about this guy reading a book on the sideline NFL game? So there's this guy in the playoff game, superstar, like $100 million contract, and he was on the sideline in the middle of the playoff game reading a book. Big, bad, 6'4", 220-pound receiver reading a book, and the book was called Inner Excellence by a guy named Jim Murphy. Well, I happened to connect with Jim Murphy. My brother played with the Eagles, and so I had lunch or breakfast about a week ago with Jim Murphy, the guy who wrote this book. And as we're sitting, talking, chatting, connecting, he started crying. And I asked him, almost like I asked you, hey, where are these tears from? Right, you're on top of the world. Like you just did it. Like you did. I've written 2 books. Like I want to be the guy that's like 100,000. He sold 100,000 copies in a day. #1 New York Times bestseller. I'm like, man, I could do that. And it was like, I said, where are these tears coming from? And he said, Sam, well, 2 things. #1, like his mom just passed away. Right, so there's a human element. Got all this fame and success, but like my mom, right? I think her name in Japanese means the way. Like my mom just passed. But also, Sam, these tears are coming because I'm like, dude, why would God choose me for this moment? Like, I'm not worthy. He's like, I wrote this book back in 2009. I was selling 2 or 3 copies a week. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it blew up. I said, peel back the layers a little bit. I said, tell me what you're doing. What were you doing that day when like this happened? I was watching the game, me, myself. He's like, dude, well, funny enough, he's like, I'm a business coach. I coach athletes and leaders and founders, and business was slow. Business was slow, so much so where like my credit card, I don't think I was gonna be able to afford paying my credit card. I was walking down the street, I think it was in New York, I saw a homeless man. I wanted to give him some money. I didn't have any money. So I went to the ATM to get some money out of the ATM, get like $300 out. It said declined. So like, things weren't looking good for me. So I decreased the number, tried to get 100 out. I got 100 out, my last pretty much $100. He's like, I still had some in investments, but like my last like cash. And I went back and found that homeless man, and I gave him my last $100. And this person's a person of faith, right? So he's like, and I felt like, he's like, as I was walking down the street, he's like, it felt as if like this voice or God was telling me like, hey, would you rather own like this, there's like the skyscraper, huge building, like be the owner of that building, or have written the most recent book you wrote, which is called like The Secret of a Meaningful Life. He wrote a new book, or written that book talks about, hey, what real life is all about. And he's like, man, I got no money in my pocket. I gave my last $100. I'd probably rather, yeah. He's like, probably written the book. And he said it felt as if God told him, okay, get ready, your life's about to change. Well, later on that night, he goes to his hotel. He's not even watching the NFL game. He's watching the college football game because he has some friends who, do stuff in college. And his phone starts blowing up. A.J. Brown, star receiver, is reading his book on the sideline. 20, 30, 40 million people are watching the game. Fast forward, a week later, he's on the ESPYs, and his book has sold 100,000 copies, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm sitting down with him like, dude, this must be the best thing in the world. He said, no, like, I'm going through some stuff.
Yeah.
But also, I'm meant for this moment. And he said, no, by the way, it's not about me. He's like, people want to interview me. I want them to talk about the message of the book. Because that book, that Inner Excellence book, talks about, okay, the secret of like high performance under pressure, but also the secret of like a meaningful life. And it's things we all search for. It's peace, it's confidence, it's courage. Like as I was sitting and listening, like that's all we're really searching for. Yes, organized, but you want to have confidence. You want to have a little bit of peace. Man, that anger, right? If we're called to be courageous.
Yeah.
And I believe that courage, I think it's a calling. I think we're meant to be courageous and step into these moments. I think it's a command, like we're not meant to sit back and just watch evil happen. But I also think it brings clarity. I think when you're courageous, it gives you clarity to say, you know what, I know that I need to do this thing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go and do this thing. And so for me, just thinking about, okay, yes, this idea of building a team and what really matters and like the secret of a meaningful life, it's peace, confidence, courage. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it takes you dying to yourself and your desires and your ego. Oh, look, I'm a nonprofit leader. No, I'm actually going to empower the people who want to make it, who have more funds and resources. I'm going to help them make the impact that they want to make. And that's what you do. That's why people show up for you, right? You are the most unassuming, like, superstar.
That's very
Yet
kind.
people continue to show up because they see your heart, they see your humility, And they know, like I know, like everyone here knows that it's not about you. There's something so much bigger. And so as you continue to step into your power, if you will, which is that humility, people will continue to show up. And they'll continue to be there for you, continue to rally behind you. And it's easy to organize behind you. Because we know that you're not doing it for, at the family office I work for, we say, it's a bunch of athletes, right? So we say, play for the name on the front and on the back. Like a bunch of people, it's like, oh, it's my last name, Acho, I showed up. No. But in baseball, it's like, hey, you might be a player for the Mariners. It's like, hey, do it for your family and your future.
Yeah.
Like the name on the back, but also the name on the front, the community. People who look like you, or maybe they don't. But it takes dying to yourself and your ego and realizing, okay, maybe you are made or meant for such a time as this. It's not an accident that you're here. And that's the thing I think a lot of us are afraid of. If I could just kind of I talk for a living.
No, please.
I do. I'm on ESPN. I talk for a living. I speak. But I think the fear that a lot of us have is the lie we believe is that there'll be another moment. Like, we're good. Somebody else will do it. And it's like, that may not be true. Like, the moment might be right now, and you might have a lot of things you've been neglecting that you actually need to use, not for your good, but for the benefit of others. So like my challenge or my ask would be like, what is that thing that you've been sitting on? Maybe it is your relationships with people. Maybe it's your money. Maybe it's your voice. Maybe it's your tears. Maybe it's that anger. You're like, okay, I'll let it slide. No, what if you use that for the benefit of that person who looks something way from a different part of town, who doesn't look like you, doesn't think like you might have disagreements with? Because if we could have easily said, oh, forget about the food mart. Somebody just, dude, we were praying for 20 years that somebody would buy up that liquor store.
Right.
And so thank you for just saying yes. So like your yes is an answered prayer. Your showing up, your yes, your belief that you are made for this moment, I guess somebody on the other side, outside of this building, that is waiting for you to say yes to the thing you've been sitting on.
Yes. We just have a minute and a half left, and I don't want you to give a call to action. I want you to give us an idea of how we find that patience, that clarity, that peace, to be as courageous as someone like you is, to take on these challenges.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that any of us can do before we take that next step, before we organize, before any of that, is just to slow down. Take inventory. Where's your heart at? That's something in that book, it talks about guarding your heart above all else, for out of it flow the springs of life. If your heart's not right, nothing's gonna go well. And so before you take that next step, right, it's almost like a call to inaction. You know what I mean? Just sit down, right? For some people, it's prayer or meditation. It's not like going to do the next thing. It's okay. I love to write. For me, a couple hours yesterday, I was just writing. And my heart was on the pages. That's why I wrote some of the books I've written. It's my heart is on those pages. Yeah. And so my request, it's not a request. It's more than a request. It's my ask is that you would just take a beat. I know you're excited. I know you're angry. I know you're sad. I know you're confused. Right? All those feelings are real, but don't let those feelings run your life. Start with faith, then go to the facts, and the feelings can be at the back end, right? Feelings come and go, right? Faith, facts, feelings, right? It takes faith to say, okay, man, that liquor store that's been there for 4, 5, 7, 8 decades is that's gonna change. It takes faith to say, I'm gonna show up and I'm gonna do something. It takes faith to say, man, I'm worth something. Start with faith, and then go to the facts. Okay, what do I have? Maybe it's time. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's people. All right, those are the facts. right? The feelings, they have to be last. Because sometimes I don't always feel like going to work out or train. Didn't feel like when I was playing. Still don't feel like it now, you know? But I kind of need to for my job. I always feel like having those hard conversations with people who disagree with me. But I have to believe that there's something better on the other side. So take a beat, take a breath, take some inventory, and then let faith guide you before the feelings. That'd be my ask of you in the audience.
Give it up for Sam Acho. I love you. Thank you. Thank you so much.